But my name is Katie Farmer. I'm Executive Director of Strategic Priorities at West Virginia University. And I am joined here today by Vishal Agrawal, who is the Chief Strategy and Corporate Development Officer at Humana, and Ken Gabriel, who is the CEO of BioForge. But I know that it is almost 3 o'clock. It is probably our nap time if we're going to take a nap, and most of you have been here all day. So if it's okay, I'm hoping to do a little bit of an audience engagement just to get everybody moving again. Okay, so please stand up if you have done one of any of these things in the next 24 hours that I name. Stay seated until I'm done. Okay. Have you utilized product recommendations on Amazon, Etsy, Target, Walmart, Instacart, any of your favorite grocery stores based on your previous order history? Have you used a streaming device to pick and help you choose what next movie or show you want to watch based on your past choices? Have you followed a tailored fitness plan based on your set goals? Have you ordered a bespoke, custom-made pair of athletic shoes, jewelry, name your favorite retail product? Have you curated music playlists and songs based on liked music? I did that from the back in my playlist. Or, if I haven't gotten you yet, I probably will get you this time, because I'm sure half of you did this on your way in today to the conference, or you snuck away to go upstairs. Have you submitted your favorite coffee order that's super fancy at your favorite coffee shop or Starbucks? Okay, stand up. Have you done any one of those things in the last 24 hours? Okay, we're standing up. I've done, I think, all of these. Okay, for the people who have not stood up, go ahead, stretch your legs for a minute, but I think you get the point that so many aspects of our society are personalized. Okay, sit back down. We're gonna get into it now. So today, I am hoping that we can talk about how we get smarter about customizing our health span journey. And while I know, Ken and Vishal, you come from many different backgrounds in kind of two different worlds in many respects, I do think that you do share a few common denominators through personalization and innovation. So from precision medicines that help our own bodies heal and fight disease, to tailoring your health services, delivery methods, and insurance plans. So Ken, in your world, I think you're kind of hopefully moving away from the mass production of drugs toward more advanced manufacturing of gene and cell therapies that are really tailored to the patient. So patients are receiving treatments that complement their own genetics and biology, which is just mind-blowing and incredible. And Vishal, I think in your world, you're looking at vast changes to our health system and looking more holistically at the healthcare continuum, and also kind of starting to prepare for what that, I think, in the industry world, I am no industry expert, but healthcare 3.0, which is the next wave of where we're headed. And I think you'll probably talk a little bit about that has to do with communities and populations. And as we've heard from our healthcare leaders earlier today in the morning about meeting people where they are. So I think thanks to both of you, we can kind of talk about the personalization of health through kind of a nature and nurture lens. I know we talked about that a little bit on our prep call. And I think for many of the audience members here, I think they'll see your work as pretty nascent, but also really promising. Okay, enough from me. On to Ken. Ken first. So, let me get to my question. Okay, tell us about BioForge and the future of precision biologic medicines. What are some of the challenges and opportunities we should expect from gene therapies? And how can we meet the challenges of manufacturing head-on and more efficiently and readily move some of that research from bench to bedside?
So I think one of the things you've heard today throughout all the presentations, we can summarize into what we talk about at BioForge is the best medicine for you is you. And precision biological medicines, whether that's CAR T-cell, gene therapies, other things that are beginning to emerge, are essentially medicines that are precisely made for you. That's the precision part. And the motivation for BioForge, I can tell you through stories that I'm sure we're all reading every day. I know I run across them every day. You read an article about a 2-year-old who got genetic treatment, whether it's CRISPR or some other gene manipulation, and all of a sudden they can hear their parent's voice for the first time. How can you not be moved by that and excited by the potential of those sort of medicines? Unfortunately, you read a little bit further, or you scroll up a little bit further, depending on what your mechanism is, and the price tag for that treatment was $2.5 million. Well, there's hundreds of thousands of toddlers and grown-ups and cancer patients and others who would benefit from that but can't get it because it's too expensive. And it's not being manufactured in a way that it's equitable and broadly accessible. That is the motivating function, if you will, or the motivating purpose of why BioForge exists, is to create the innovations and breakthroughs in the manufacturing of precision biological medicines to speed their delivery, use, and impact. My argument, our argument is, we don't need more discovery-driven research to demonstrate more of those papers and showing the one-offs. We need people to directly and deliberately work on taking that $2.5 million drug or $500,000 drug or $1 million drug down to the point where everybody who needs one can get it. And to just give you a sense of what that number means, I'm going to pick on the oldest, most developed therapy, which is CAR T-cell therapy for cancer. The total number of people who have received that therapy is 35,000 people since 2017. These are particularly effective for blood cancers. Every year in the United States, in 2024, there was 143,000 people who developed blood cancers. 4,500 of them severe stage 4 versions. We're barely treating 10% of the most dire cases of the people who need these treatments. That's how bad it is. So our intent is to directly and deliberately go after the manufacturing, not come up with more things, directly go after, create the breakthroughs and innovations so that then the private sector can accelerate and deliver those.
That's fantastic, Ken. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Vishal. You recently said in a podcast, I think it was last year, our health system has really good capabilities. We have the opportunity to integrate those capabilities on behalf of the customer in a truly different, more personalized and direct way over the next decade. So digging into this a little bit more, how is insurance sector looking at health? And can industries like pharma and insurance be more innovative, meeting people where they are culturally, genetically, geographically, to focus on healthier outcomes? And what opportunities do rural states and rural populations like West Virginia offer in this innovation space?
Well, thanks, Katie. First of all, I mean, there's a lot there, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it in the conversation. Ken, that was fantastic, just hearing what BioForge is doing to create more personalized medicines so that we can move away from a one-size-fits-all to something that's very, very tailored to what an individual really needs. I would use the word "and," because it's that and, Katie, you mentioned Healthcare 3.0, and I heard Clay Marsh and others talk about it throughout the day, that it's the personalization of medicine on the prescription side, but it's also a lot of what you heard throughout the day today in terms of exercise, sleep, community, purpose. And all of those are very individual things. And frankly, I go to a lot of healthcare conferences and with this job, and this is one of the most inspiring conferences I've been to. And so hats off to all of you for having this type of discussion with this breadth of leadership and intentionality to explore all aspects of the future of where health could be going. I do think that your state, in some ways, is unencumbered by the extensive healthcare 2.0, which is the heavy infrastructure that other states almost have to use. You can almost leapfrog that, both with the personalized medicine, but also with those 4 components of exercise, sleep, community, and purpose to really drive better health outcomes. And we at Humana have been spending a lot of time thinking about this. In some ways, use the word insurance, I don't like to use the word insurance. And in some ways, insurance is for random, infrequent, financially consequential events that are beyond the control of the insured person, right? That's why we have car insurance, that's why we have flood insurance, or lots of other property and casualty type things. But as you heard throughout today, healthcare is not random. It's not infrequent. It is financially consequential, but it's not beyond the control of the individual. And that's the opportunity to change this mindset of insurance being a fee-for-service, somebody goes, gets something done, and then the insurance is a transaction processing system behind the scenes, to something that's more of a subscription model, similar to what you're used to with when you buy something at Amazon, or you have something that you're a subscription to YouTube, or a service that really understands you, your preferences, what makes you tick, what matters to you. And we have the opportunity to build that type of system. Now, what it requires, and we've been spending a lot of time shifting away from the fee-for-service model that is so predominant in healthcare 2.0 to a what we call value-based model, where we're prescriptive, we're moving upstream and delegating the cost of that individual or that panel of individuals to the health system to better manage. And that approach really focuses on removing the waste from the health system. That's the unnecessary emergency room visits, the unnecessary hospital admissions. And there's a lot of experience. We now cover about 1 in 10 people in this state, largely through Medicare Advantage, both individual Medicare and then the Public Employee Insurance Administration, PEIA, and that's fantastic. It gives some ability now, I think, for West Virginia to lean in to a model that can be much more proactive in the payment model. So I think there's an opportunity to build that payment model out. However, what it needs is a delivery system capability, a chronic care delivery system capability that complements the acute care model that that exists in most communities across the country. And we've been investing a lot in building that out. What is the elements of a chronic care delivery system? Well, it's primary care, it's home health, it's pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, behavioral health, social determinants of health. These are very high touch point areas of the health system that currently are very fragmented, right? How often do you go to your pharmacist at your local grocery store or at your retail pharmacy, and do they actually know who your primary care doctor is or talk to them? Sometimes, but it's not often integrated. We have the opportunity to build that type of system. You have the opportunity to build that system in your communities so that those high touch point areas of healthcare are better connected to better manage someone's chronic health risk. So that, I think, is that coupled with those 4 tenets of exercise, sleep, community, and purpose are, I think, the essential ingredients that we need to personalize for this healthcare 3.0 journey.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think I want to ask both of you this question, and I think both of you touched on it a little bit, but I would love for you to expand upon it a little bit more. What are some of the most exciting developments on the horizon for personalized medicine? And what steps do we need to take to get there? And I think most importantly, how can the audience here today engage? You choose.
I'm happy to jump in. I think from our perspective, obviously, if it wasn't clear from my opening statement, I think the greatest opportunities and excitement is thinking directly and deliberately about the manufacturing, bringing down the cost, bringing down the variability, bringing up the repeatability. I'm old enough to remember when these things were the size of 2 bricks, weighed as much, and only investment bankers on Wall Street had them. There's no law of evolution that said it was inevitable that they would get to be this size and we could all afford them and depend on them. Hundreds and thousands of people focused directly and deliberately, worked hard, created innovations in the manufacturing of these devices in the billions per year so that we could all have them. That's the exciting thing for me, is the demand that is being generated for precision biological medicines. Because unless we create that demand, there are currently no incentives to bring the cost of these things down. And I value, and I appreciate the value-based marketing and other approaches, value-based payments, but so long as those don't turn into what I've seen, which is precisely because precision biological medicines wipe out, take care of a fundamental missing gene or capability, whether it's sickle cell or the ability of a toddler here, you're curing them of it forever. And so sometimes value-based pricing is really, what are we going to get out of you for the next 20 years because we've solved your problem? When you have that kind of a pricing model, there is no incentive to bring the cost down. MIT would still be getting money from me for the value added they gave to me because of the PhD I got more than 30, 40 years ago, by that logic. And so I think from our perspective, one of the things we have to be careful of, aside from the natural financial incentives and barriers and regulatory things that could come up, is the flip side, precisely because precision biological medicines get at you, it is going to drive a fundamentally different approach to pharmaceutical production. And ultimately, even regulatory, because of that one-size-fits-all. For the last 150 years, pharmaceutical drugs have been mainly chemicals and all identical. That led to batch fabrication, giant production facilities that make the same thing. The ultimate endpoint of precision biological medicines is I make one dose of something, because the precision medicine for you is going to be deadly to me, and it won't work on you. So it has to be a fundamental shift in not only how we make things, but the production tools that are involved, the regulatory procedures. What does it mean to do clinical trials for a drug that only has one person who's going to get it? Why do we even need to do clinical trials? Why not just a release signature for someone who believes in what's done? So it is a fundamental shift that is going to involve people understanding what it means, accepting that it's going to cure things in ways that you have not been used to, by going back to what I said. The best medicine for you is you, but it's going to come with attendant benefits and risks.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I do feel like we should bring back a phrase that was mentioned in some of the earlier discussions, the notion between genetics and epigenetics, and that genetics are probably 20 to 30% of the overall determinant of health, and the epigenetics is more in that 70 to 80%. And I'm 100% with you, Ken, that for the genetic components, having personalized medicine that really is targeted to that individual's unique molecular fingerprint is going to be the future. I studied biochemistry, and one thing, it was during the time of the human genome that was being coded end to end, and it was a big race, as many of you recall, to code the human genome. 3 billion base pairs, right? 3 billion ATCGs that determine what a chromosome has. That's a lot. And we thought there would be a lot of magic in that, and there is for a number of conditions. But the 80% that's epigenetic, or 70 to 80% that's epigenetic, is not based on that 3 billion base pairs. Today, it's based on your 5-digit zip code. And that needs to be a part of the health system too, really understanding the context of that individual. And so it's not an either or, it's really an and I think we're both approaching it from, in some ways, the nature versus nurture. The nature is your genetics, the nurture is the environment and context, or the epigenetics. And in some ways, we need different payment models for those different systems. I think the genetics is much more traditional insurance. The epigenetics has an opportunity to be more value-based, where you really need to understand the context of the individual's environment to better manage those costs.
That's awesome. I'm going off script here, but how do we get there, though? I mean, and how do we really engage with this audience? I mean, is it policy? Is it collaborating, building partnerships? Is it more research? I mean, how do we get to where you want to go, both of you?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with this one. I walked by the Starbucks this afternoon, and I have my Starbucks app here, and boy, short, tall, grande, venti, milk foam, lots of different types of milk. I can have steamed hot, I can have extra hot, I can have warm. There's 170,000 different combinations of your coffee order that those two poor baristas have to be able to figure out how to manage and make happen. All that is determined by individual preferences on your app. If we can personalize a cup of coffee at this level of truly unique, what is it that gets you more excited to drink it? We need to be able to have that same approach to healthcare. And chronic condition management is about managing nudges so that you're incrementally better. I love the conversation where the triathlete had come up here and said the first lap was, the first time he was on a track, he ran a mile, and then the next time it was 5 laps, and then it was 6 laps, and then 2 miles, and he kept, ultimately going on to be a really accomplished athlete. But there's something about being able to create nudges for slightly more positive behavior. And if you go back to those 4 things of exercise, sleep, community, purpose, each of those it is so individual. It's based on who we are. And it's as important to who we are as our genetics. And those are things, if you nudge a little bit, you get a lot better outcomes. We, in our primary care clinic, so Humana has an insurance arm, it also has a care delivery arm where we're building this chronic care delivery system. It's called CenterWell. Our primary care clinics, where possible, try to measure VO2 max for all of our patients. Maybe by show of hands, how many of you have discussed your VO2 max with your doctor? There's a handful, maybe 2 or 3. How many of you have discussed grip strength with your doctor? There's a handful also. Well, it's good. There's some. I've been in groups where there's no one. But those are the components of the exercise question that we can influence. And it doesn't take a lot of exercise to start walking a few more steps a day, or doing one extra lap on a track, or trying to make it to do something that's for your health, for building your stamina. And if you have a health system, a primary care organization that's connected to your pharmacy, connected to your behavioral health, connected to your home health and your social determinants capabilities, and in an integrated system, that system gets to know you and can help you nudge to slightly better activities. And I think that there's actually things I think that are unique to West Virginia from the conversations I've had last night and this morning that I hope we can get into about what you can build upon.
Ken?
I'd say let's not, how do people get involved? Don't over-constrain or don't over-plan for things. My entire career has been one of working in innovation, creating breakthroughs in innovation in a couple of different fields. And the biggest impact on the way I approach innovation has come from the fact that I was privileged to have two, what I call tours of duty at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which taught me everything I know about innovation. And one of the things that we often get wrong is we think we know exactly how that innovation is going to progress and develop. DARPA created the ARPANET back in 1969. I can guarantee you no one at that time was thinking about e-commerce or ordering 170,000 combinations of coffee drinks off of a connectivity to the internet. The internet was developed to survive a nuclear catastrophe because all communication systems prior to that had been hub and spoke, where if you wanted to communicate, you had to go to a hub and then they would get connected to another part of the spoke. The ARPANET, the genius of the ARPANET, the breakthrough and innovation of the ARPANET, the network was the network. You could destroy 98% of it and you would still have communication go through the internet. And so whether it's precision medicine, whether it's exercise, healthcare, how do you get people started, whether it's the internet, what I would say is do not try to over-constrain, do not try to over-predict, but instead work to constantly adjust as that innovation fully flowers. That's why with precision medicine, we resist the temptation to get involved in public policy or healthcare policy or insurance and reimbursement. You know what? If you try to do that, you'll never create the innovation. Create the innovation, drop the price down, increase the quality, make it accessible, and that will be its own driving function to change the way we think about precision medicine. So focus on the innovation, drive it, and everything else will have to accommodate that innovation.
Thank you for that. That's great advice. Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question for Ken or Vishal? Anybody? Okay, go ahead. Jen, you're up.
Sorry, Ken, this is partly because I know and adore the BioForge, but maybe you could talk a little bit about Elevate Bio and their move to Pittsburgh and what that's going to mean and the sort of the regional vision for some of that?
Sure, happy to. Oops. Sure, happy to. So what Jen is referring to is BioForge was initiated with a $100 million gift to the University of Pittsburgh, $10 million a year for 10 years. And in addition, as Kinsey, my colleague and friend, reminds me, it was matched by $125 million from the University of Pittsburgh for a BioForge building. We're often confused between the building and the organization. But as part of creating that infrastructure and desire to see some of the discovery-driven research coming out of the University of Pittsburgh Health Sciences and accelerate its impact, that's the whole motivation for BioForge. And when we have the building built, the anchor tenant of that building, actually something like 70% of the building is going to be occupied by a for-profit, privately held, successful CDMO, or a CAR T-cell manufacturer that is based in Waltham, that's going to set up their second manufacturing facility in Pittsburgh, and will be, as I said, the anchor tenant of the building when it's done next year. So that does two things, at least two things, three things for the region. One, it brings in a legitimate CAR T-cell manufacturer to leverage some of the capabilities and the developments out of the health sciences. It helps economically anchor the building, but it also relieves us, the BioForge organization, who is continuing to create breakthroughs and innovations in the manufacturing of all precision medicines, not just CAR T-cell therapy or cell and gene therapy. That means we don't have to do that work because it is already being done by Elevate Bio. So it is very complementary to what we do, and it's also additive to the community that they're coming into.
What a great opportunity for the region. It's exciting. Any other questions? Clay? Yes, Lauren's coming over to you, or Jen, whomever gets there first.
Great. Hey, thank you. So I'll ask Vishal, I'll ask you a question about, with the extreme amount of money that we pay in our country for healthcare and the durable outcomes that we see versus other westernized countries. You mentioned nudging, and you mentioned sort of the holistic approach toward trying to help people be healthier, but it hasn't worked so well for us so far. So what do you see as the critical levers that we need to push in the future to try to create a healthcare system that promotes health and also that starts to reduce the cost of healthcare for us?
Well, thank you, Clay. It's a big question. I think you mentioned this morning that we spend $4 to $5 trillion on healthcare, close to $5 trillion now in our country on healthcare. I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but there's been a lot of work that says about 20 to 25% of that spend is waste. So we do not have a spending problem. We're just spending it too far downstream on the wrong things. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the senior population. That's kind of core to what Humana does. It turns out for your typical book of seniors, for every 1,000 members, you typically have at least, say, 200 admissions to a hospital. We call that APTs, admissions per 1,000. So it's not exactly 1 in 5 because some people go more than once, but that's generally 20% or so get admitted to a hospital in a given year. Now, that's an interesting stat, but what's more interesting is how many of those admissions are considered by the government's definition avoidable. These are people crashing into the emergency room for their first dialysis. These are patients who have a urinary tract infection who, if only something was done a little bit upstream, could have minimized that downstream cost and morbidity. That number is roughly 40 to 50 admissions. So again, roughly 20 to 25%. We have to go after that. We have to redirect how we're spending our money from all of these downstream, fix it after the bad stuff happens, to more upstream prevention. It's sort of like we have a system, we're all familiar with our cars, where we say, don't worry about the oil change, we'll just replace the engine when you need it. And our system, our health system, pays for that engine change, but it doesn't always pay for or incent the oil change. Now, we're obviously a lot more complex than a car. However, the analogy, I think, is sort of how we spend our healthcare dollar. So I think a key part, to answer your question, Clay, is to go back to how do we create the right incentives in a system so that everybody gets their oil change, that everybody knows how to better manage their own chronic care trajectory. And it gets back to some of those things around exercise, sleep, community, and purpose. And I didn't mention one of the really unique things that I really felt in my last day and a half here. There's a real sense of purpose to this place and to the people of this state. I live in East Virginia, and in Falls Church, which is right by DC. I gotta say, we barely know our neighbors. I've lived in the same house for 20 years almost. I don't think the community here has that problem. You know your neighbors, and you care about them. And when you study longevity, as I know you have, there's a real importance to community and purpose. You can't bottle that. You can't put that in a pill. You can't inject that into somebody. That's part of your fabric. That's part of what makes this place unique. And I think that's going to be part of your Health 3.0 forward journey that helps you, I think, leapfrog what a lot of other communities do not have. And that's something you can build upon as you think about how to reconceive the health system for your people.
Great question, Clay. Thank you. And I think it speaks volumes to many of us in this room that you've only been here for a day and a half, and it's palpable. And people feel that when they come to West Virginia. So thank you both very much for traveling here and joining us today. And thank you for participating in the audience. And now we're going to wrap it up with our last panel. So thank you all.